Day service. Happy Mother's Day. This is what the Word of God says. Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh, but in vain. Lo, children are an heritage from the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of one's youth. Happy is the man who hath his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate.
Now thank we all our God, with hearts and hands and voices, who wondrous things hath done, in whom his world rejoices, who from our mother's arms hath blessed us on our way, with countless gifts of love, and still is ours today. All praise and thanks to God, the Father now be given, the Son and him who reigns with them in highest heaven, the one eternal God, whom earth and heaven adore, for thus it was, is now, and shall be evermore. lifting our Savior's name. When parents speak and show His love, faithful each day the same. Father of all, God of peace, we look to You alone. Come with Your precious gift of love, and make our house Your home.
Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. She will do him good, and not evil, all the days of his life. Her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praiseth her. Many daughters have done virtuously, but thou excellest them all. Favor is deceitful, and beauty is vain, but a woman who feareth the Lord, she shall be praised. Today we honor the women in our congregation and our community. Yes, it's Mother's Day, but we want to draw attention to all women, regardless of whether they're a mother or a grandmother, and certainly there's probably an auntie. We want to honor all women, for women are created in the image of God, every bit equal to men in value to God and in purpose, in relationship, and superior and reigning over creation. Each woman who is listening to me right now is endowed with qualities that are at once unique and essential. Some of you are grandmothers, some are mothers, some are wives, and some are single with unrivaled devotion to Jesus Christ. All are important. In Australia's constitutional monarchy, to be called a lady is a title of honor and respect. Queen Elizabeth is a lady. Our Premier, Gladys Berejiklian, is a lady. Our Governor in New South Wales is a lady. Are you a lady? Today we pause to ponder God's design, and as we contemplate his design, there is a purpose that is necessarily attached to it. And each woman is to fulfill this purpose. How can you fulfill that purpose and thereby be, in heaven's eyes, a lady? The sermon in a sentence: attention to the little things is what makes a lady. Attention to the little things. I take you to the book of Ruth. Ruth is a wonderful example, and Ruth truly is a lady. She was seemingly an insignificant woman, but she became a world-changing lady with 3 little traits. Can you see Ruth's influence today? Let me ask you, do you know anybody named Ruth? Ruth is a common name, even 3,000 years later after the historical Ruth lived. Anyone named Ruth really is named after this historical figure from 3,000 years ago. Did you know that the very foundations of our society, of our Western society, those foundations were molded by the descendants who were trained, raised up by Ruth? David was Ruth's great-grandson. Solomon, her great-great-grandson. And on down the track until you get to Jesus. Yes, Ruth is named in Matthew chapter 1 as an ancestor of Jesus. She is a lady. What made her great? Well, it was not her standing in life. Of all people, she was most likely to be forgotten. Ruth was born into a culture that equated girls with dogs. They really didn't have much standing in society. Ruth was a foreigner. She was not Jewish. And she lived long before multiculturalism was a value. Ruth became a widow with no hope of having another husband in the kind of social system that they had. It would have been a brother to the deceased that would marry her, and there was no brother to marry her. And there was no hope of having a son, therefore. So Ruth was a pretty hopeless person. And she was a poor beggar with no pension to fall back on. So everything looks pretty black for Ruth. And yet out of that blackness, a light shines that continues to shine today. Ruth, a lady. It was little things that made the difference. Inner qualities, subtle, intangible, easily overlooked, but enough to make a world of difference. Here is what we will learn from Ruth as we just take a quick scan of this book of the Bible today and make application to all of the ladies. First, if you want to be a lady, you must be a woman of conviction. A woman of conviction. Second, if you want to be a lady, you must be a woman of compassion. And thirdly, if you want to be a lady, then you must be a woman of character. Let's think first about conviction. If you want to be a lady, you must be a woman of conviction. Sometimes it's not easy to do the right thing. The flow of popular opinion of what is in vogue, what the fad is, sweeps us in the wrong direction. A direction that we may not deliberately choose, but a direction we end up going in if we don't consciously fight against it. But Ruth did not go with the flow. She was a woman of conviction. She saw through the fog of convenience, the fog of what everyone else is doing, and she deliberately chose the right path, even though it went against everyone else. The story of Ruth begins with her mother-in-law, Naomi, and Naomi's husband, Elimelech, living in Bethlehem, that very place that centuries later Jesus would be born. Naomi and Elimelech, along with the other residents of Bethlehem and of Judea, that surrounding area, were suffering because of a famine. Rather than stick it out, they decided to immigrate. And so they left Israel and they moved to a foreign country, to Moab, where food was plentiful. 10 years they were in Moab. And during those 10 years, tragedy struck Naomi 3 times. Her husband Elimelech died. And then her 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion. Both of them died, but not before they had taken wives. And so Naomi is left bitter, hopeless, with 2 daughters-in-law. And she tells the daughters-in-law, "There's nothing left for me. I might as well go back to my hometown in Bethlehem." And that's where we pick it up with Ruth chapter 1, verse 15. "And she said," that's Naomi, "Behold, thy sister-in-law is gone back unto her people." That's Orpah. Orpah went back to her own people, try to find a husband there. "And unto her gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law." And Ruth said, "Entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest I will go, and where thou lodgest I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God." What conviction! What conviction! Eloquently spoken in a decision. Naomi had absolutely nothing to offer to Ruth, but Ruth makes a choice. She's driven by higher principles, and she chooses to be with Naomi, to be with Naomi's people, Israel, and most importantly, to be with Naomi's God, Yahweh. She will be a follower of the one true God. I want to point out a couple things here about her conviction. Firstly, her conviction included a choice. She made a deliberate decision. She made a choice. Now, the easy thing for Ruth would have been to follow her mother-in-law's pleading and just go back to her own hometown, remain in her own country. She surely would find another husband there. She wasn't all that old, and she still had surely some prospects. That would have been the easy thing. Naomi had nothing to offer to her. We've already said she didn't have another son that could become Ruth's wife, Ruth's husband, I should say. And there's no money. She's in bitterness of soul. There's no good prospect going along with Naomi. But Ruth makes this courageous choice. She chooses Naomi's way. She chooses Naomi's people, and she chooses Naomi's God. It only took a moment for Ruth to decide. She didn't ask for extra time, but in that moment, her eternal destiny was determined. Against all hope, against all advice that she might receive, humanly speaking, Ruth made the right choice. She chose the right God, and in so doing, she was transformed from being merely a woman to being a lady who was part of changing the world. Ladies, the issue that Ruth faced in her day is not unique. You too must be decisive. You must have a depth of conviction that chooses what is right, even if it's not what others would advise. What's fundamental about the choice that Ruth made is she chose God. Have you chosen God? Is God first in your life? Have you put your trust in Jesus Christ for salvation? Now, we have to be careful to be precise with that answer. Some might answer that with, well, of course I have. I go to church after all. But going to church is not necessarily the same thing as choosing God. Someone might go to church because they like the social network that's there. Someone might go to church because they want other people to think good of them. Or they might go to church because they can have some power, have a leadership role there. Have you chosen God? Now, of course, when you choose God, going to church will be part of the way that you express that. But it has to be God that's at the forefront, not merely going to church. Others might say, well, I prayed a prayer when I was a child. So, yes, I would say that I have chosen God. But does your life demonstrate that you've chosen God? Is there a difference in your life because of that choice? You see, conviction is what we're talking about, that results in conversion, that is the result of decision, making a deliberate choice. It's not just something that falls in our lap. It's something that with conviction we must choose. And I trust that you've done that. That's what Ruth did. To choose otherwise would have made all the difference in the world. She made the hard choice, and she stuck with it. That brings us to the second thing about conviction. Conviction refuses to compromise. It refuses to compromise. When Ruth said, "Your God will be my God," she was saying that as a once and for all decision, no going back. She burned her bridges behind her. She would never return to Moab again. How do we know this? Look at verses 17 and 18. Where thou diest, will I die. I'm not going back. And there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me. When she saw that she was steadfastly minded to go with her, then she left speaking unto her. That is, Naomi stopped trying to persuade Ruth to stay behind. When you talk about conviction, you talk about decision. Here is decision. This is choice without compromise. She went on a one-way ticket to Israel. I imagine she had parents back in Moab, grandparents perhaps, aunties, uncles. She left all that behind because she was choosing the one true God first and foremost, and there was no going back. I hope this is the depth of your conviction. It's a little thing, but it makes all the difference. Conviction is what makes a woman a lady. Number 2, if you want to be a lady, you must be a woman of compassion. A woman of compassion. Ruth arrives in Bethlehem with Naomi, and sure enough, just as Naomi had said, she didn't have anything. There was nothing there for Ruth. There really was no future for Ruth there. And Naomi was bitter in soul. She said, change my name to Mara, because I'm bitter. And we can just imagine Naomi not wanting to go outdoors during the day, wanting to be isolated from people, just all huddled up and feeling badly for herself. She had lost her husband. She lost both of her sons. She has suffered so much. And she comes back, she's got nothing in Bethlehem. And she's got Ruth. Ruth does something about it. Though disadvantaged herself, she shows compassion for her mother-in-law and does what little she can find to provide for the two of them. We read from chapter 2. And Ruth the Moabitess said unto Naomi, Let me now go to the field and glean ears of corn after him in whose sight I shall find grace. And she said unto her, Go, my daughter. And she went and came and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And her hap was to light on a part of the field belonging unto Boaz, who was of the kindred of Elimelech. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and said unto the reapers, The Lord be with you. And they answered him, The Lord bless thee. Then said Boaz unto his servant that was set over the reapers, Whose damsel is this? And the servant that was set over the reapers answered and said, It is the Moabitish damsel that came back with Naomi out of the country of Moab. And she said, I pray you, let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. So she came, and hath continued even from the morning until now, that she tarried a little in the house. Compassion. Compassion means to feel pity to the point of doing something about it. Sympathy and compassion are not the same thing. Sympathy feels your pain. Compassion does something to alleviate your pain. Ruth had compassion on Naomi. Now, what she was doing here was not an enviable task. There was a law, it came from the Old Testament law, the law of Moses, that when the reapers went through the field, say a field of wheat, and they're gathering the grain, and inevitably a little bit gets dropped on the ground. You can't be perfect, and a little bit dropped on the ground. The Mosaic law said they must not pick that up from the ground. Whatever accidentally falls on the ground has to stay there so that poor people can come, and they have to expend the effort and just take what is left on the ground. Well, that's what Ruth was doing. Here she went, and what little specks of grain she could find in the dirt, that's what she was picking up. And as we read, she was there from first thing in the morning all the way through the day, through the heat of the sun. We can imagine how backbreaking it was to constantly be stooping all the way down to the ground to pick up this little kernel here and that little kernel there. And at the end of the day, she probably only had enough to make a loaf of bread for herself and for Naomi, not much that would be left over. And that means she'd have to be back there the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. No days off for Ruth, not if she and Naomi were going to eat. This is compassion in action. May the Lord give us ladies like Ruth. Ladies who routinely sacrifice self-ambition. Ladies who attend to duty, even when it is backbreaking and exhausting. Ladies who appreciate that what is best is seldom what is easiest. There's no question about the pressures that modern women face. And I admire the women in our congregation and in our community. And this is a good day that we've got, Mother's Day, to not only express thankfulness for our mothers and for our wives who have become mothers, but for all women, whether they're married or not. All women created by God, all women are special. All women can be ladies through conviction, compassion, and character. But I appreciate the ladies. I take, for example, ones who are mothers, and back to the time when the kids were little, keeping up with the kids, that they have clean clothes, preparing them meals, transporting them between home and school and music lessons and sport teams and clubs and church and back home again, picking them up, supervising their homework, tucking them in at night. The list goes on and on and on and on. As someone has calculated what a mother would have to be paid for the duties she fulfills, the skills that are required for those duties, and it's an astronomical figure. Oh, we are so thankful for you, ladies, and having that level of compassion, not just for your children, but for your husband in many respects, for those in the community, and it just overflows. That is the making of a lady. And we saw that in Ruth, didn't we? Now, Ruth was not married. She was, in fact, a widow, but she's expressing compassion, going out of her way to provide. We come to number 3. If you want to be a lady, it's not just conviction and compassion. You must also be a woman of character. A woman of character. How rare it is to find a woman or man of character today. Gone are the days when a person's word was his or her bond. Now we are driven by greed more than goodness, by protectionism more than purity, by escapism more than excellence. It's no surprise from a recent study that nearly 75% of teenagers said there's absolutely nothing wrong with lying. It's perfectly all right. Everyone does it, and if it suits your purpose, it's completely legitimate. What happened to character? What happened to character? Do you know how these teenagers who responded to this survey learnt what they express as their belief? They learned it by observation. Mother, father, auntie, uncle, brother, sister, friends, over and over again. Lie, 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 lie. I don't know if you've encountered this, but it seems lately I'm encountering lies left, right, and center. People look me right in the eye and they'll tell me a lie. It's terrible, the lack of character in our society today. It really wasn't different for Ruth. She lived in what was called the days of the judges. If you want to know how desperate those days were, just read the book of Judges. It's in the Old Testament. You read that book. You talk about despicable, the awful things that happened in that book. The book is summed up with this verse. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did as he saw fit in his own eyes. That's anarchy. Ruth lived in a very bad age, and yet she had character. Let's read about it, chapter 3. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of corn, and she, Ruth, came softly and uncovered his feet and laid her down. Now, what's she doing here? Ruth is offering herself as a young woman in marriage to this older man. Now, he qualifies as a kinsman redeemer. Kinsman, he is a distant relative of Naomi's, and so Naomi not having a son to give to Ruth, it can be another kinsman, and Boaz qualifies, but there's a bit of an age difference. There's also a bit of a status difference. He's a prominent person. He's got some wealth, and she's a nobody, a foreigner. But she comes in because he has shown kindness to her. And she has the courage to come and uncover his feet late at night while he's asleep, all alone there where he sifted out the wheat, and she lies down at his feet. Let's pick it up again. And it came to pass at midnight that the man was afraid and turned himself, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. So he was startled. And he said, Who art thou? It's very dark, you can't see her. And she answered, I am Ruth, thine handmaid. Spread therefore thy skirt over thine handmaid, for thou art a near kinsman. That would be physically demonstrating, yes, I'll marry you. And he said, Blessed be thou of the Lord, my daughter, for thou hast showed more kindness in the latter end than at the beginning, inasmuch as thou followest not young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, fear not, I will do to thee all that thou requirest, for all the city of my people doth know that thou art a what? Virtuous woman. You are a virtuous woman. Her reputation had spread far and wide. And now it is true that I am thy near kinsman, howbeit there is a kinsman nearer than I. Tarry this night, and it shall be in the morning, that if he will perform unto thee the part of a kinsman, well, let him do the kinsman part. But if he will not do the part of a kinsman to thee, then will I do the part of a kinsman to thee. As the Lord liveth, lie down until the morning. Boaz is flattered. He is impressed that this young woman is not chased after guys her age who are attractive and who might be cool, but she is offering herself with all of her good character as a virtuous woman to him, an older man. And he takes this vow before God himself that if the near kinsman refuses, he will indeed marry Ruth. Now, what a wonderful love story. It's beautiful, this story of Ruth. Ladies, we all want to be remembered for something. May it be that your children will remember you as Ruth was remembered, a virtuous woman. a woman of character. A woman who could be depended upon because her yes meant yes and her no meant no. A woman who was devoted to God, who was pious, who read his word, who prayed for the children, for the grandchildren, for the nieces and the nephews, who cared. A woman of character. Are you a woman of character? And for a moment, I want to speak to the men who are listening. If you have a wife, you have a mother, you have a daughter, you have someone in your life who is a woman of character, she is a lady. A lady. And not just today, but every day. Treat her as the lady she is. Treat her as Queen Elizabeth would be treated. Treat her as any lady should be treated. Well, we've seen these small, seemingly small, qualities in Ruth. Conviction, compassion, character. But they made a world of difference. And for that world of difference, I give you a bonus point. This bonus point is what happens next. For when you are a lady, you share in the cheer. You share in the cheer. What happened to Ruth? Ruth ended up married to Boaz. But that's not the main point of this biblical record. Yeah, it's a wonderful story, the romance, and how you have such a grand reversal going from being a foreigner who has no attachment to God whatsoever to being someone who's accepted in Israel, who has a reputation as a virtuous woman, is now married to a prominent man. That's a wonderful story, but that's not the happily ever after. The happily ever after is what comes next. For Ruth bears a child, and that child, his name is Obed. And Obed, when he is grown, his wife has a child, and that firstborn's name is Jesse. And when Jesse is grown, his wife bears a child. Children, in fact. And the youngest of those children is David. Ruth's great-grandson, David, who became king of Israel, whose son Solomon was the wisest that ever lived. And down the track of descendants, we come to Jesus. Ruth, the poor, widowed foreigner, became an ancestor to your Savior and mine. And so it is that Ruth, a woman of conviction, of compassion, and character, was a lady of cheer, a lady who had a life that mattered. And the same will be true for you if, like Ruth, you give attention to the little things. For through the little things, a lady is made. Let's respond to God's word by singing this hymn as our prayer to God.